From the first diplomatic maneuver to the final annexation order, this is the story of the political technology that dismantled one of India's wealthiest kingdoms without a single battle. Each treaty tells a story of calculated deception, financial entrapment, and the relentless erosion of indigenous power. Here is the full breakdown of that strategy, starting with the earliest seeds of the political trap. The annexation of Oudh in 1856 represents a critical juncture in the history of British India, embodying the culmination of a sophisticated political technology of conquest developed over a century. This was not a military campaign characterized by pitched battles, but a bureaucratic operation where legal fictions, financial leverage, and strategic psychological pressure were deployed to dismantle a sovereign state. The fall of Oudh offers a stark illustration of how the East India Company transitioned from being a trading corporation to an imperial power, securing vast territories not through conventional warfare, but by meticulously closing a political trap. This strategy traces its origins to the Battle of Plassey in 1757, a pivotal event in British expansion in Bengal. Robert Clive's victory was less a military triumph and more a successful political conspiracy. By bribing Mir Jafar, the commander-in-chief of the Nawab of Bengal's army, Clive ensured that the Nawab's forces stood largely idle. This engineered victory allowed the British to install a puppet Nawab, establishing a precedent for indirect control. The true prize came in 1765, when the company secured the Diwani, the right to collect revenue from the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II. This established a dual system of governance where the British controlled the financial lifeblood of Bengal, while the nominal Indian ruler bore the responsibility of civil administration. This arrangement allowed the company to extract immense wealth, estimated at £38 million sterling between 1757 and 1780, which played a crucial role in financing Britain's Industrial Revolution, while simultaneously driving Bengal into economic ruin. The Bengal model was then formalized and expanded across India through the subsidiary alliance system, refined by Governor-General Richard Wellesley. This system ostensibly offered protection to Indian rulers, but its terms were designed to be ruinous. Indian states were compelled to accept the permanent stationing of British troops within their territories and to pay a hefty annual subsidy for their maintenance. They also surrendered their right to conduct independent foreign policy, thereby isolating them diplomatically. The costs of maintaining these British forces were often so exorbitant that they consumed upwards of 50% of a state's annual revenue, forcing rulers into chronic debt. When these debts mounted, the company would demand land cessions in lieu of cash payments. The Kingdom of Oudh, a loyal British ally since the 1760s, was an early victim of this trap. In 1801, the Nawab of Oudh was forced to cede half of his fertile kingdom to the British to offset the cost of the subsidiary forces. This arrangement systematically depleted the resources of allied states, making them financially dependent and militarily powerless, thus priming them for eventual annexation. Further tightening the imperial grip was the doctrine of lapse, formalized by Governor-General Lord Dalhousie in the 1840s and 1850s. Indian legal and dynastic tradition permitted rulers without natural male heirs to adopt successors to ensure the continuity of their lineage. Dalhousie, however, unilaterally declared that such adoptions were invalid unless explicitly approved by the British. If a ruler died without a recognized heir, the state would lapse or be annexed by the company. This cynical legal fiction allowed the British to absorb strategically or economically valuable territories under the guise of legal propriety, bypassing existing treaties and traditional customs. Between 1848 and 1854, Dalhousie annexed states such as Satara, Jaipur, Sambalpur, Jhansi, and Nagpur using this doctrine. The annexation of Jhansi, despite the ruler Rani Lakshmibai's adopted son being recognized locally, showcased the arbitrary application of the doctrine. It effectively communicated that neither loyalty nor traditional legal practice guaranteed a state's survival. However, Oudh, possessing a natural heir in Nawab Wajid Ali Shah, could not be annexed via the doctrine of lapse. Its wealth and strategic importance necessitated a different pretext. The company shifted to the narrative of misgovernment. British residents in Lucknow, most notably Major General James Outram, were instrumental in constructing this narrative. They produced detailed reports cataloging instances of rural lawlessness and administrative inefficiency within the Nawab's administration. These reports painted a picture of a state in chaos where the peasantry suffered under oppression. This narrative, however, was fundamentally distorted. While Oud might not have met Victorian standards of efficiency, it was far from the dystopia depicted. Crucially, the reports deliberately ignored the British role in exacerbating Oud's problems through crippling subsidy demands and constant political interference, which had systematically stripped the Nawab of the means to govern effectively. The ideology of the civilizing mission served as a moral justification for what was an act of raw power and economic opportunism. In 1856, the political trap for Oud was sprung. Lord Dalhousie, convinced of the superiority of British administration and driven by the need to consolidate control and revenue, issued the annexation order. The legal justification was based on the unilateral British interpretation that the Nawab had failed to fulfill his treaty obligations to govern efficiently and maintain order. The British acted as judge, jury, and executioner. No independent arbitration was allowed. Wajid Ali Shah was presented with a new treaty, which he refused to sign, as it would have stripped him of all administrative authority. In response, Dalhousie proceeded with outright annexation. James Outram, who presented the final order, famously maintained a chilling silence throughout the Nawab's protests, symbolizing the utter disregard for Oud's sovereignty. Wajid Ali Shah was deposed, exiled to Calcutta, and granted a pension of 1.2 million rupees annually, a fraction of his kingdom's revenue. The British immediately assumed direct control of Oud's vast resources, initiating a summary settlement in 1856 to restructure the land revenue system, which dispossessed numerous landowners and significantly increased taxes on the peasantry. The annexation of Oud proved to be the ultimate catalyst for the Great Uprising of 1857. The systematic erosion of trust, the blatant violation of treaties, and the economic disruption caused by British policies created a volatile environment. The dispossessed landowners, the disbanded soldiers of the Nawab's army, and the peasantry burdened by new taxes all nursed deep grievances. Critically, the vast majority of the Bengal Army sepoys were recruited from Oud. They viewed the annexation as a direct assault on their homeland and their cultural identity. The simmering resentment exploded into a full-scale rebellion. The British residency in Lucknow, where the architects of annexation had worked, became the site of a brutal and protracted siege. James Outram, initially tasked with the peaceful takeover, found himself fighting for his life in the very province he had helped to subjugate. The economic and social legacies of this political trap were profound. British rule systematically deindustrialized India, transforming it from a manufacturing powerhouse into a supplier of raw materials. India's share of global GDP plummeted from an estimated 23% in 1700 to less than 4% by 1950. The British-built railways and telegraphs were primarily designed to facilitate the extraction of resources and the rapid deployment of troops to suppress dissent. Furthermore, the British deliberately cultivated and exploited existing divisions within Indian society. The census operations codified fluid religious and caste identities into rigid categories for administrative convenience, thereby entrenching communal boundaries and fostering competition for colonial favor. This divide and rule strategy exacerbated tensions and deepened divides, laying the groundwork for the violent partition of 1947. The repeated famines that ravaged colonial India, killing tens of millions, were not merely natural disasters, but man-made catastrophes exacerbated by British policies that prioritized grain exports and laissez-faire economics. The political trap set for Oud was a microcosm of the larger imperial strategy. It demonstrated how control could be achieved through the manipulation of legal instruments and the systematic undermining of local authority. The pen, backed by overwhelming military force, proved to be far more effective and less costly than the sword in securing vast territories. The annexation of Oud left an indelible scar, proving that alliances and loyalty offered no guarantee against imperial avarice. The memory of what was lost, the autonomous governance and the dignity of a sovereign state, continued to fuel resistance and nationalist sentiment for generations, ultimately culminating in India's independence in 1947. The echoes of that strategic silence continue to resonate, reminding us that the full costs of empire extend far beyond military casualties. The administrative records compiled during this era filled archives with bureaucratic prose that translated a living social landscape into categories useful for extraction. This was the true nature of the trap, a system of domination so comprehensive that it reshaped Indian society in the image of its colonizers. The treaties were chains, the legal doctrines were pretexts for theft, and the administrative reforms were masks for greed. The story of Oudh is a case study in the mechanics of imperial power, where sovereignty was dissolved through paperwork and patience. When independence finally came in 1947, it was not a gift, but the culmination of generations of resistance against a political system designed to make a proud nation voiceless in its own land. History belongs to those who refuse to be erased, and the story of Oudh remains a testament to that refusal.